A steel worker named Mike LaFair sits across from an interviewer in his kitchen in Cicero, Illinois. The tape recorder is running. He is 37 years old. His hands are thick. He has been lifting steel since he was 19. The interviewer is Studs Terkel. The book will be called Working. It will sell 1 million copies. Mike says something that lands. He says, "You cannot take pride anymore. You used to be able to point to a house you built, a bridge. Somebody built the pyramids. Now you work, and nothing has your name on it." Then he says the line that explains the next 50 years. He says it is not that the average working guy is dumb. He says he is tired. That is October 1973. That same month, 4,000 miles away, the oil ministers of Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Libya, and Algeria meet in Kuwait City. On the 17th, they announce a production cut and an embargo against the United States. By January, a barrel of Arabian crude goes from just under $3 to over $11. Gasoline doubles. Heating oil nearly doubles in a single New England winter. The Dow Jones loses 45% of its value over 23 months, and Mike LaFair, the steel worker who is already tired, is about to become the template for every paycheck-to-paycheck American alive today. Welcome to Fiscal Historian. I'm an independent financial historian, and this is the story of how the American household lost its shock absorbers. This is history, not financial advice. Do your own research. Start with the number, 37%. That is the share of American adults who cannot cover a $400 emergency with cash. 13% cannot pay it at all. That is the Federal Reserve's own survey, Economic Well-Being of U.S. Households, released last May. The number has been roughly this bad for a decade. Now hold that number in your head and look at what is happening outside your window. Oil has traded as high as $117 a barrel this month. The national debt crossed $39 trillion in March. The Treasury is now paying more in interest every month than it spends on defense and education combined. Every loaf of bread you buy is 15 to 25% pure energy, fertilizer, diesel for the tractor, diesel for the truck, gas for the oven, gas for the delivery. When energy doubles, bread doubles. And you do not have $400. Here is the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. How did the country that put a man on the moon in 1969 end up with a household that cannot absorb a broken transmission in 2026? The official story is that Americans got reckless. Too many televisions. Too much debt. Not enough savings. History tells a completely different story. What actually happened is that every shock absorber the 1973 household had was removed, one at a time, over 50 years. Not by accident. Let me show you the absorbers. Then let me show you what the people who kept them did. Absorber 1. A union wage with a cost of living clause. In 1948, Walter Reuther of the United Auto Workers negotiated a contract with General Motors that included something called a cost of living allowance. Every 3 months, the wage adjusted to the consumer price index. If prices went up, the paycheck went up. By 1980, roughly 60% of workers under major union contracts had this clause built in. The letter carriers had one. The Teamsters had one. The auto workers had one. The steel workers had one. During the inflation years of 1973 through 1982, that single contract clause protected blue-collar wages from being destroyed. When the UAW went on strike in 2023, its president said something worth hearing. In substance, it was the cost of living allowance that made working-class communities thrive for decades. When it was stripped away in the 2009 bankruptcies, it hammered them. Today, fewer than 10% of private sector workers are in a union at all. Absorber gone. Absorber 2. A fixed-rate mortgage on a house that kept up with inflation. A family that took out a $30,000 mortgage in 1972 at 7% fixed paid that same nominal payment every month through 1982, but the dollars they were paying with had lost more than half their purchasing power. Meanwhile, in the Sun Belt, Phoenix, Houston, Atlanta, Southern California, the house doubled or tripled in nominal value. The family paid back cheap dollars on an appreciating asset. That is the single largest documented inflation windfall an ordinary American household ever received. Today, the median new home sale price is $400,500. The home price to household income ratio hit 5.6 in 2022, the highest since the data series began. The 30-year fixed mortgage still exists, The house is no longer affordable to the family that needs it. Absorber out of reach. Absorber 3. A pension the employer was legally required to fund. In 1975, 27 million American workers were covered by defined benefit pension plans. The employer promised a paycheck for life. The employer had to set real money aside. If the employer failed, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation stepped in. The law requiring all of it was the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, signed on Labor Day, 1907. In 2023, the number of private sector workers in defined benefit plans was 11 million. In their place, 96 million people in 401k accounts. The median for 101k balance for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $87,000. Americans surveyed by Northwestern Mutual say they need $1.46 million to retire. The risk of old age was transferred from the employer's balance sheet to your kitchen table. Absorber gone. Absorber 4. A manufacturing job that paid a premium. In June of 1979, American manufacturing employed 19.5 million people, roughly 22% of all non-farm jobs. In 1973, the hourly wage in construction alone was 28% above the all-industry average. Those jobs were in Youngstown, Ohio, Flint, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, Lackawanna, New York, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Today, manufacturing accounts for roughly 12.5 million jobs, about 8% of non-farm employment. 6.5 million jobs gone. The towns still exist. The mills do not. Absorber gone. Absorber 5. A savings account that at least kept pace with inflation. From the 1930s through 1986, a rule called Regulation Q capped the interest a bank could pay on a passbook savings account. In 1980, that cap was 5.25%. Inflation that year was 13.5%. A Wall Street research paper calculated that in the spring of 1979, the real interest rate on ordinary deposits hit negative 5.8%. Every $100 in a passbook account lost nearly $6 of purchasing power in a single year. The New Republic called it a great savings swindle. People eventually discovered money market funds. Assets in those funds exploded from $4 billion in 1977 to $230 billion by 1980. Regulation Q was phased out by 1986, but the damage done to passbook savers during the inflation years was permanent. And today, the average savings account pays less than 0.5% while inflation runs above 3%. The absorber was never really there. The 1973 household had all 5 absorbers. The 2026 household has, on average, none of them. That is why a $400 car repair ends a family. Now here is the part the financial press does not tell you. Some households absorbed the shock. Some people came through 1973 to 1982 with their wealth and their families intact. They did not do it with savings accounts. They did not do it with long-dated treasuries. They did not do it with whole life insurance. And most of them did not do it with gold. They did it with 4 specific things. The first was a trade, a plumber, an electrician, a welder, a diesel mechanic, a framer. Their wages were already 28% above the all-industry average when the embargo hit. If they were union, they had a cost of living clause. If they were not union, they had something just as valuable, a skill people would pay cash for on a Saturday. An economist named Peter Gutman published a paper in 1977 estimating the unreported American economy at roughly 10% of the measured economy, $176 billion at the time. Most of it was people working on each other's houses, cars, and barns for cash. That cash was not reported. It was not taxed. It was not indexed to anything, but it tracked inflation instantly because the plumber charged what materials cost plus his time. When materials went up, the bill went up. A trade is a portable, unreportable, automatically inflation-indexed income stream. There is a reason the tradesmen Turkle interviewed in 1973 sound less anxious than the white-collar workers in the same book. They had something no bank could devalue. Today, the United States is short an estimated 500,000 skilled tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, welders, diesel mechanics, crane operators, linemen. A 19-year-old who starts an apprenticeship this year earns more in their 30s than most college graduates without the debt. That is not opinion. That is Bureau of Labor Statistics data from this quarter. The second was a fixed-rate mortgage taken out before the Inflation. The family that bought a house in 1968 at 6% and stayed put paid that mortgage in cheaper and cheaper dollars every year through the 1970s. By 1982, cumulative inflation had cut the real value of the original loan balance roughly in half. A $30,000 loan in 1972 was effectively a $13,000 loan in 1982, same nominal balance, half the real weight. If the house was in the Sun Belt, the nominal value had doubled on top of that. The mechanism only works during inflation. It does not work in deflation. It does not work if you cannot hold the job. But when it works, it is the closest thing to a free lunch the American financial system has ever handed a working-class family. The third was a farm owned free and clear, not a farm leveraged up to buy more acres in 1978. Those farms went bankrupt in the farm crisis of 1985. 300,000 farmers defaulted nationally. Iowa farmland lost 61% of its real value between 1981 and 1987. The farms that survived belonged to the old man who had paid off the note in 1966 and refused to borrow against the land for more. He grew his own food. He grew crops that tracked commodity prices. He owed nothing. He slept. The fourth was physical precious metal, bought early and held with discipline. Gold became legal for Americans to own again on December 31, 1974. By January 21, 1980, it had gone from $35 an ounce to $850. Silver went from around $6 in January 1979 to $49 during the Hunt Brothers Corner in January 1980. These are the headline gains. Almost nobody captured them. Most retail buyers did not sell at the top. They rode the metals down through a 20-year bear market that did not bottom until the early 2000s. The people who made money on 1970s gold and silver bought early, sized small, and had either the luck or the discipline to sell into the peak. The mechanism is real. The discipline is rarer than the mechanism. 3 of those 4 survivor strategies are effectively out of reach today. The pre-inflation mortgage requires a time machine. The debt-free farm requires land that now costs more per acre than most Americans earn in a decade. The disciplined metals position requires a peak nobody sees coming and a seller who knows when to walk away. Only one of the 4 is still available to the 26-year-old. Reading this, the trade, that is not an accident. It is the last shock absorber the system forgot to take away. Now let me tell you who did not come through. The Franklin National Bank on Long Island collapsed in October 1974 after an Italian financier named Michele Sindona drained tens of millions covering foreign exchange losses. It was the largest bank failure in American history at the time. 5 of the 10 largest bank failures up to that point happened between 1973 and 1976. In 1979, 2 brothers in Fort Lauderdale named William and James Alderdice opened a company called the International Gold Bullion Exchange. They promised discounted gold, delivered in 3 to 4 months. They collected somewhere between $140 and $200 million from 23,000 customers. They never bought the gold. They used each new customer's money to cover the previous customer's delivery. When gold prices turned in late 1982, the company collapsed. The bankruptcy was announced March 1983. William Alderdice was stabbed to death in his jail cell in 1984. His brother received 10 years. 20,000 families who were trying to escape inflation lost everything they had set aside. These were not greedy speculators. These were working and middle-class Americans in their 50s and 60s who had watched what inflation was doing and were trying to protect their families. Then there was the Rust Belt. On September 19, 1977, the parent company of Youngstown Sheet and Tube met at the Pittsburgh airport on a Sunday and announced the closure of the Campbell Works the next morning. 5,000 workers, one day. The town called it Black Monday. Over the next 5 years, Youngstown lost roughly 50,000 jobs. On June 25, 1982, Bethlehem Steel announced its Lackawanna, New York plant would shut in 6 weeks. 10,000 direct layoffs, 8,000 more in the surrounding Buffalo economy. On December 31, 1983, Kaiser Steel shut its Fontana, California mill at 4 in the afternoon. 8,800 workers walked out that day. Their homes did not appreciate. Their pensions, where they existed, were cut. Their savings in passbook accounts lost purchasing power every year, and their skills were tied to an industry that was leaving the country. The tradesmen among them moved The production workers mostly did not. That is the gap. Now let me tell you the part of the story that almost never gets told. The 1973 household was not saved by the government. Not by Nixon's price controls. Not by Ford's whip inflation now buttons, which Alan Greenspan later described as unbelievably stupid. Not by Carter's crisis of confidence speech. Not by federal rationing coupons. The households that came through because they had something the system did not give them and could not take away. A skill. A piece of paid-off land. A mortgage locked in before the storm. A handful of coins in a safe that no regulation could cap. The government saved the banks. The families saved themselves. Here is the closing insight. For 50 years, every time the American household lost an absorber, the same household was sold a replacement as a product. The union contract disappeared. In its place, the side hustle. The employer pension disappeared. In its place, the 401k and the fee-charging advisor. The pre-inflation mortgage disappeared. In its place, the cash-out refinance, the home equity line, and the 84-month auto loan. The manufacturing job disappeared. In its place, the gig app that takes 30% of the fare. The inflation matching savings account disappeared. In its place, the annuity, the whole life policy, and the crypto exchange. Every substitute was a product with a fee attached, sold back to the family the system had just stripped. The $400 American is not reckless. She is a customer. The households that came through 1973 to 1982 were the ones who stopped being customers. They built their own shock absorbers, mostly with their own hands. Mike LaFair understood that in 1973, sitting in his kitchen in Cicero. He said, "The average working guy isn't dumb. He's just tired of paying rent on things he used to own."